Device equals storage location C drive DOS directory hi mem.sys. Device equals storage location C drive DOS directory emm386.exe. Switch no EMS. DOS equals unordered list item hi item UMB.
Well, that brings back some memories. Radiohead, I have to admit, has been problematic for me. And it's probably not their fault. Probably. There is something crucial I have learned about myself. When it comes to making the effort to hear something new, if I get the same recommendation from a bunch of different sources and I am already a fan, I tend to feel validated. However, if I hear from a bunch of different sources that a thing is great and I've never heard of that thing, I immediately start building barriers. If you're the first person to tell me to listen to a thing, I'm far more likely to do it than if you were the 20th person to tell me to listen to a thing. And that seems to remain true regardless of how highly I might otherwise value your opinions. It's definitely something I'm working on. And before you ask, yes, I've seen The Wire. In 1993, I left Tallahassee and moved to Atlanta. And from 1993 to 1998, I was not playing any music professionally. I finished one degree, but before I could start on my work at Georgia Tech in acoustical physics, the apartment I was sharing with my then fiance burned down. We didn't have insurance, and I could no longer afford not to work full time, so I got hired to work support for a software company. And that's how my career in IT started. Musically, during this period, I was digging deeper into jazz, especially avant-garde, free jazz, and fusion. My mind was still all about peak performances, spontaneity, challenging sounds. Ring modulators. It was at around this time I started hearing from friends and coworkers about Radiohead. It was also around this time I started hearing from friends and coworkers about Oasis, Blur, Live, The Prodigy, dozens of others. At the time, they all kind of blended together in my brain into a kind of jangly, self-deprecating gray paste. Over the years, though, people stopped talking about Blur and Live and The Prodigy. And the only time Oasis is mentioned these days is to comment about what jerks they were. But I still kept hearing about Radiohead. I remember once asking my friend Ian from work to lend me his CD copies of Kid A and Hail to the Thief, because the cover reminded me of Absolutely Free by the Mothers of Invention. I tried to find how my heart could be so blinded. How could I be fooled just like the rest? I remember pretty much nothing about either one, though. The turning point happened for me in 2007. That was when Radiohead released In Rainbows. At that time in my life, several things were happening. Many of them were extremely difficult, most of them my fault. But one of the best things happening at the time was I was getting to know Emily, and Emily loved Radiohead. In 2007, she too was undergoing some very difficult things. We talked a lot, and she relayed to me how meaningful In Rainbows was to her. At that time, I was traveling a lot, so whenever I was on a plane or in a hotel, I just started putting on In Rainbows on repeat, making myself not only listen to the album, but hearing it enough to know it entirely, memorizing it. At the time, it was a way for me to take Emily along with me. And of course, under those circumstances, I developed a fondness for the album In Rainbows. But in my brain, that one album became the Radiohead exception. I still didn't consider myself a fan. But now here I am 16 albums in to my musical self-reprogramming therapy, and it's time for an honest assessment. Am I, in fact, a latent Radiohead fan with too many self-imposed barriers to acknowledge that fact? Or are they just another mid-90s rock band whose fan base won't, for whatever reason, let them go the way of, say, the presidents of the United States? Well, let's spin OK Computer and find out.
Clever.exe parameter load new parameter storage location C drive folders playlist OK computer .m3u commencing playback.
First thought, it's a reactionary one. The things I noticed about Hail to the Thief and Kid A all those years ago still seem to be true. That is, this isn't the place to go if you're looking for push the limits improvisational risk-taking. This is a collection of songs. Little orchestrated, deterministic, compositional air sculptures. Which means when I encountered them in the mid-90s, they were disqualified. But in the intervening years, I've gotten over that prejudice. Maybe. A little maybe? After all, the same set of descriptors can be used to describe Glenn Gould playing the piano sonatas of Paul Hindemith. Or the complete output of the Beatles, for that matter. No, this time I was able to hear what I couldn't before. At least a little. First couple of times I listened to OK Computer was on headphones, but the first time I was able to give it my full attention, what I noticed was just about every song was... Well, it starts when the song makes an unexpected turn, and pretty much every song has an unexpected turn on this album. Then the turn does something not unlike Paul Hindemith. That is, it stays close enough to an established tone center, an established key, to sound as if it's maintaining a diatonic structure, but it does so while emphasizing internal tensions, internal dissonances. I'll show you what I mean. One of my all-time favorite jazz standards is a piece called Ricordame, Remember Me, by Joe Henderson. Sometimes recorded as a Latin tune, but most of the time as a bossa nova. It's mostly in the key of A minor, but there's a few modulations, nothing drastic. Here are the changes. The thing I love about this song is that the melody Joe Henderson wrote, well, by making the chords minor sixth chords, he set up the ability for each phrase to end with one of the most dissonant intervals possible, a diminished fifth, or tritone, while never leaving the notes of the chord. Check it out. And it's this kind of thing that I hear in just about every song on OK Computer. In fact, that very same minor sixth structure is what makes the first melody of Paranoid Android sound the way it does. Starts on C minor. There's the sixth, setting up that tritone. And when it climbs back down to this note, which is the sixth of the G minor, it also happens to be the major third of the C. So it starts on the minor, ends on that major. It's a pretty cool little thing. Subterranean Homesick Alien uses a descending thirds over pedal tone, which isn't all that uncommon. But by switching to the 7 in the chorus, they make the subtext text. And that's kind of brilliant. In Let Down, the arpeggios of the two guitars are in different time signatures from each other, creating a massively complex polyrhythm. In Electioneering, the riff accents the 4, but the melody accents the 2, and this creates this gigantic stack of fourths. In The Tourist, they use the same 7 minor thing that Return to Forever uses in After the Cosmic Rain on their album Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. Return to Forever. And then The Tourist. The point is, there's a million little things for a theory geek like myself to pull apart, clean with a Q-tip dipped in denatured alcohol, and then refit into the mechanism. A million little insights and tricks, each one cleverer than the last. Okay, I'm intrigued, because on top of everything else, it's starting to dawn on me that some of this is actually insanely musical.
Update commencing. Please do not unplug or power off until process completes.
I was once in my hotel room at the Movenpick in Voorburg, just outside of The Hague in the Netherlands, watching French arts and music channel on TV. They were airing a documentary about Carla Bley. Something she said in the documentary always stuck with me. She was talking about her songwriting process, and I won't be able to quote her exactly, but to paraphrase the point she was making, songwriting to her is not a process of sitting quietly and waiting for inspiration to present you with a song to write down. Instead, it's an arduous process of starting with a single note you like, and one by one, trying endless combinations of additional notes until the next one sounds correct, then repeating that process about 200 more times. When I hear the songs on OK Computer, I hear that same level of attention and consideration. I hear the evidence of time spent, alternatives considered, and songs composed, not thrown together. And about the musicality. I could talk for a while now about how none of these songs use traditional changes but remain memorable, but let's break it down to just this. Any band that can come up with something as beautiful and elegant as this is okay with me. So yeah, I'm a fan. I like it. Now the only question left for me is how this music is going to live in my life going forward. Because I'm starting to notice that listening to this music is a bit like watching a Stanley Kubrick film. It's undeniably skillful and beautiful, but not something you can have on the background while you're making yakisoba. Attention is required, and time to sit for a minute before doing the next thing. Something else I know about myself, I sincerely love it when I find out I was wrong.
Update complete. It is now safe to turn off your computer.